project working in the Butte and Bozeman area, rural western Montana, turning out the vote. During the pandemic, the on-the-ground voter turnout efforts stopped, but I wanted to continue organizing in a time of crisis, so I connected with Paul Getzos, who is the former National Director of People's Climate Movement. He's the founder of Community Voices Heard, which is a black women-ran organization out of New York. He helped win tens of thousands of union jobs out there for welfare moms back in the early 2000s. And we touched base, and we wanted to test a hypothesis of organizing in a time of crisis. His was organizing in a time of crisis. Mine was hyper-localized organizing for community gains, deliverable gains. And what that means is, people work to get a stop sign that's always been there, so whenever they drive past, they can say, I organized and got that, and we build from there. We set the cornerstones at winning these community gains. We've done a lot of work in western Iowa that we'll talk about later around federal implementation, and really what I wanted to talk about today is first we can start with just for 5 minutes. I want folks to go around and do introductions and just say, who you are and kind of what kind of community activism that you've, in a sentence or two, that you've done in the local areas. For the first part here, I'm just pulling up my agenda on my telephone quick. I do want to go around and do kind of like a pair share. So I'm guessing a lot of you folks probably know each other, but you've kind of highlighted some of the issues that are important to you. If we can take 5 minutes, find someone that you don't know well, or you don't know at all, and just pair up and just for the next 5 minutes talk and expand on the issues. That'll help to prime us for the larger conversation and breakout that we'll have before and after the presentation. So does that sound good to folks? Okay, perfect. So I want to just do kind of a go around here quick, and if folks want to just jump in here I got 3 questions that I want to prime folks with, and one is, what do you think the biggest priorities are in your community right now? And then what do you think the biggest priorities are in northeast Iowa in general, which is, we can say everywhere from here to Waterloo and down, you know what I mean, over to Dubuque. And the third one is, something we can talk about later, is who else would we need to reach out to in the community for broader discussion about building a base around some of these issues. So I know some people have said climate. If it was the ideal meeting, what other stakeholders would need to be in that meeting to talk about climate or to talk about the ditch beautification and planting of natural prairie grasses and things. So if folks want to pipe in and say what they think the biggest issue in their community is, I'll take notes.
Well, the biggest issue right now is the, what do you call it? Roadside management.
Okay.
That's clearly right here. And it's absolutely typical of the rural and urban divide thing that you hear people write about. It's the 3 rural supervisors against the 2 city supervisors.
Okay. And you said 3 rural against the 2 urban?
Yep.
Okay. And the rural folks are in favor of taking out this roadside management program, and why is that? That's kind of surprising that it would be rural, not the urban area.
They said it was the money, but they don't have no facts.
Well,
They don't want flowers in the ditches.
they say that there's not enough rock on the roads, that the roads are going into disrepair because we're spending too much money on the vegetation on the roadsides, planting that and so forth, and not enough on rock. And what has come out of those meetings is that rock has gone up in price phenomenally. And so it has also come out that the roadside management program is indeed benefiting us, also financially as well as in other ways, and would accrue more benefits as the time goes on. So this is a short-sighted effort that they are making to get rid of this program, saying that they're going to save money, although they have not given us the facts on that. The people themselves in the town have put forth facts.
And what the roadside management, is that's a county fund, or do they get any state or federal funding from that?
Yes, we do. There's the Iowa Living Roadway Fund that supplies much of the seed, also equipment for seeding, and some for other kinds of maintenance, mowing, I believe. So our county has received funds from that Iowa Living Roadway Trust Fund. And so it hasn't cost us very much compared to what it would have cost if we had to do all that by ourselves. So our basic investment has been in the manager of the program, his salary and his benefits. And yeah, and he in turn has done a lot more than he would have had he just been a manager. He's
And
planted.
this is a county employee?
This is a county,
Was
a county employee,
Oh.
Corey Meyer,
Resigned.
this is the Corey Meyer story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you
And-
know Corey or do you know of him?
So the story is that Corey gave an excellent report on all of the things that he's been doing, all of the projects that they had completed, how they were treating the trees, the big brush in the roadways so that they don't grow back. And after he gave this stellar report, the supervisor said, and now we're cutting the program. We are eliminating your program. There was no consultation, with the engineer who researched the program, started it up. It was a program that the entire state was looking at as a really good example of, I mean, the best.
It was a model program.
Yeah, it was a model program, and there are 47 other counties that are doing this, some of which have stopped the program and now want to get back in because they're finding that the old way of spraying everything in sight and mowing everything in sight ain't working.
Did you
It's
say
too
46
expensive.
counties in Iowa?
47, Yep.
47.
we've got 99.
Is there anyone here, Wanda and Dale, or maybe you, who is a farmer and can explain the thinking, if it has anything to do with thinkings of farmers at
No,
all?
the other
Can
thing
anybody
is,
else? Okay. excuse me.
talking about farmers, the other thing is, some of the farmers like to mow the ditches.
Sure.
And they like to mow the ditches, I guess whenever they want to mow the ditches. Well, if you plant these prairie plants, you can't do that. You have to give them a chance to grow and to thrive and so forth, and you can only mow them once. So this has been an issue.
really?
Plus, a lot of the farmers want their ditches to look like grass. They want it to look like their lawns.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like that when you do prairie plants. They're growing at different heights and so forth, you know. And there isn't I don't think there's a really good understanding of what the roots of the plants do under the ground, you know. An appreciation for the purification of the water, for channeling it down, and for holding the roadsides together. So they don't need as much gravel, you know. So these are some of the issues.
Interesting. And does everyone kind of agree that this roadside management program is the biggest pressing issue in the community right now, or does anyone disagree with that? Is there another issue that should be highlighted?
Do you guys think this is one issue, but the underlying issue is also the division between the Republicans and the Democrats. That's a real thorn under the saddle that's always there in every issue that comes up.
Yeah.
There is a very, a group of people that are, well, what can I say? They're just very into what they're doing. We are not in favor of guns. Most of us think it's fine for people to hunt, but we don't want guns in our schools. We don't want them in our courthouse. We don't want them in this center. The sign on the door at Club 45 says, "This is not a gun-free zone." And there's a big gun right on the window. So that just shows you one aspect. These are not bad people. We're not saying that they're bad people, but there has been a feeling of maybe not being able to talk to each other rationally.
Right.
It just hasn't worked. Now, Fred has gone over there various times. Fred
Mel.
and Mel, yeah. You can talk more
Janelle.
about that.
Yeah,
So
they're
you
nice.
can talk more about things that you know from there.
The animosity, it's
nationwide, it's worldwide. I mean, people tend to get into camps,
Mhm.
and so they will support their group without emotionally, without trying to look at what their arguments are. So they feel threatened. So and I've heard lots of comments saying, well, they're opposed to, like you were saying, like they don't want flowers in the ditches, but it's sort of like, well, this is a way that we're going to get under the skins of the libtards.
Mhm.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, fine. But at the same time, I hear, I heard people commenting about how black students at Luther were encouraged to walk through town and go into businesses, introduce themselves, and they said, they were greeted well. Nobody tried to bar the door or was scared. Some were probably surprised, but they were fine. But my thought was, and I don't know, my thought was those same people that were encouraging them to go into local businesses would have told them not to go to Club 45.
Mm.
Said that would not be a friendly place for you to go. Well, I've been there, and I know people there, and they would not have had any problems. They would have been happy to have had the black students come to talk to them, because they're not afraid to tell you what they think about something, and they enjoy a discussion. They're trying to convince you. I don't agree with most of what they say, but I've always been treated with respect there. So I think there's room for dialogue, and the more you can do that, the more you can break down that emotional barrier that pops up first.
I think that's a great transition into the slide, because I agree with Fred. I love working with conservatives. I love working with Republicans and libertarians and all of them. So some of our strongest allies over in Western Iowa were folks like Brian Jack Holder, who was the 4th candidate, Libertarian caucus, House of Representatives guy going for the bid, or supervisors and stuff. So if we can get the slide, are you ready to go? So in this slide, I'm going to talk just a little bit about. I'm going to talk a little bit about, who UTST is, United Today, Stronger Tomorrow, the work that we've done so far, and kind of what we're looking at right now, and really seeing if any of these items align with what we're talking about, what community priorities are. So if we go to the next slide, Fred. So what is UTST? UTST is a multi-year organizing and movement building initiative in the Intermountain West and Upper Plains with a focus on connecting community issues and needs with accountability campaigns that will ensure that hundreds of billions of federal dollars flowing into these regions are equitably deployed, and that the projects that they fund are successfully implemented.
Okay.
We believe that this moment requires deep organizing to scale across our project areas, which has been deprioritized by many progressive funders and national networks, and where the right wing has taken hold. And in all honesty, that's what's happened. The right wing has our board of supervisors, our city councils, our school boards. They're integrated everywhere. We wish that we had the kind of organizing apparatus and autonomy that the right has, and we need to get to work on fixing that. And that's what UTST does. We go in and we do hyper-localized populist organizing, and we're operating in Iowa, South Dakota, Colorado, Utah, and Montana. Our work initially started with vaccination equity. We got a mask mandate passed in Sioux Falls, South Dakota about a month after I got brought on. I was brought on as the first organizer, and my colleague Michaela, who was a student out of SDSU. And from there we went on to identify that vaccination rates for multicultural communities in South Dakota were abhorrently low. Less than 1% of Black, Asian, and indigenous folks were vaccinated, while over 70% of the white population of South Dakota was vaccinated. We also provide support to
Sorry.
No, you're good, Fred.
I didn't mean to.
We also provide support to a number of other states and work with a national network to share strategy and policy support. Our fiscal sponsor is Community Change, or formerly known as Center for Community Change. So they're the ones that sponsor what UTST is, which is considered a special project. We're very small. There's 9 of us across the United States and only 4 organizers. So we've been doing this for about 2 years. In all of our states, it's just one person that's delivering all these things. So keep that in mind when you think about the kind of specialty that Paul Getzos has been able to rally around these specialized organizers to do this work, to be able to manage with just themselves. And we operate on 3 principles: transparency, accountability, and community inclusion. We can go to the next one. So what has UTST accomplished? In Iowa and Woodbury County, back in 2021, we organized a coalition led primarily by indigenous and labor allies working together, which I consider a pretty unorthodox alliance, considering Standing Rock just a hair away from our memories. But we did it, and we rallied against the misappropriation of COVID recovery funds to build a federal prison, and pressured the United States Department of Treasury to include a special compliance statement making the construction of congregate facilities an ineligible use of funding. UTST and Woodbury County, Iowa saved this country almost $500 million that was going to go towards new prison projects with COVID recovery funding. So Iowa's doing big things already. In Potawatomi County, after exposing the misappropriation of COVID recovery funds from the American Rescue Plan Act to buy a ski resort, we built a broad coalition to fight for public input on the spending of COVID recovery funds. We initially, in the end, won $1.5 million for rural community priorities and 5 new water mains for the small
Excuse
towns.
me, can you stand over that way and speak
Oh.
out? That way you can look and speak
Oh, there we
toward
go.
us, toward us a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, that's much better. So yeah, after exposing that misappropriation, we about buying a ski resort, and yes, that's a real thing. We had a ski resort in Iowa that we bought with COVID recovery funds. Talk about priority. But we did finally pressure them to put $1.5 million into rural priorities and win 5 new water mains for the rural communities. And then something that nobody will ever know that this long-haired hippie did, but statewide we pressured the Office of Chief Information Officer to submit a letter of intent to the federal government to participate, for Iowa to participate in the BEAD program, which is the Broadband Equity, Accessibility, and Deployment Program. It came down to the wire. We had 72 hours to get them to do it. Them and Florida were the last ones in the country to have not applied, and we pressured them to apply for $100 million to get broadband coverage to every home in Iowa over the next 10 years. You can go ahead again. So this next slide, this is more about what we've accomplished. So nationally, due to the good work on our COVID recovery funds and the American Rescue Plan Act across our projects, UTST was invited to present with the opportunity to bring community leaders from our states to the White House in Washington, D.C. this last December to meet with the Biden administration officials leading on the Inflation Reduction Act and the Domestic Policy Council to help provide feedback on the implementation of some of these new bills coming out. So you can see on the left there's a Daily Non-Pareil article with some folks from Potawatomi County and Woodbury County standing outside of the Eisenhower executive offices, and then that's a meeting in the old Secretary of War room in the White House. So, you know, little things can turn into big things very quickly with this work. You can go to the next one, Fred. So top line potentials right here. What we're working on is we're not looking at this like a political campaign. This isn't a movement campaign. This is an activist campaign. When we come in and we start working in these communities, we're in it for the long haul. We're talking 5, 10, 15 years of actual base building and power building to shift the dynamics the same way that conservatives have over the last 40 years. It's been hard to fund that kind of long-term investment because a lot of national funders want immediate results, but we have gotten a good chunk of funding recently into Iowa just to do base building. Build a base of power and win some stuff for the progressive agenda broadly. So multi-year campaigns focused on policy change at the regional, county, and city town levels and corporations. Would love to get into a corporate fight sometime. Focus on projects with government funding and private investments, including the BIL, which is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which was a historic investment, biggest we'll ever see in our lifetimes. The Inflation Reduction Act, and potentially the CHIPS and Science Act, which parts of eastern Iowa have already been awarded with millions of dollars to expand onto new facilities to start building computer chips here in the United States as we lessen our dependency on foreign products. And also, you know, this could include public and or private sector targets. Over in Utah, we're exploring taking on Pacificor right now. So that's going to be a really fun one. And then Coalition of Labor, Environmental, Clean Energy, Faith, BIPOC, Rural, Immigrant Businesses, and other organizations aligned around the set principles of unity and goals. Strong base building components, and then with a potential to electoralize. Right now, C4 funding is hard to get. A lot of our work naturally leads into electoral, especially on the county supervisor campaigns that led into a lot of our coalition members end up running for office. Some of them won, some of them got defeated. But that's not something we do. We don't do electoral yet, but there is a potential to work towards that. Go ahead to the next slide. And our 4 campaign pillars that we do all of our work on, this is what we've agreed on across all of our projects with the organizers, is good jobs and strengthening workers' rights. That's an important thing. Ensuring that good jobs are available to all Iowans. Prioritizing projects that reflect community needs and help ensure a sustainable Iowa. And then investing in long-term economic development in marginalized communities with a specific focus on rural regions. And not just rural in the common sense, like, you know, we're in western Iowa, which, you know, God love Iowa CCI, but they haven't operated over there in 2.5 decades. So, you know, we're reaching these communities where organizing infrastructure doesn't necessarily exist in a fashion that can move targets and build power onto itself. Before we go any further, does anybody have any questions off the bat about anything I've gone over, just talking about what UTST has done and kind of what our mission statement is?
Have you endorsed candidates? We're a nonprofit, and that is something that I think we can't do.
Right, we have not endorsed candidates because we don't have any C4 electoral funding. There's 2 buckets when it comes to recognized organizations. There's C3, which there can be, and then there's C4, and C4 falls into the electoral, where that's a realm that we don't necessarily touch for multiple reasons, because we're not seen as a Democrat organization or a leftist organization nationally. We're seen as a base building organization. If we started endorsing candidates, it might skew that. One example, for example, if we were going to get into endorsements, there was a libertarian, there was a Republican and a Democrat that we would have ended up endorsing for the Board of Supervisors in Potawatomi County. We would have endorsed both of them because they were both going against a literal fascist that was at the insurrection, who ultimately won, unfortunately. Any other questions?
Did Iowa get any part of that $100 million?
Yeah, we're gonna get, at minimum, $100 million.
Oh
We
my
will get
goodness.
$100 million because of that campaign. So every
Wow.
state, if they applied for that, the intent to participate in the internet broadband program, each state, if they applied, would get a minimum of 100. It's, you know, California will get more, of course, Texas will get more, but we're going to get a minimum of 100 million. And the NTIA is mapping out where that coverage is going to be. I saw Chad Ingles, Representative Chad Ingles, posted on there a partial map that's been released on his Facebook page. But that's something we're watching closely to make sure that CWA and IBEW and the utilities unions get a seat at that table when they're mapping out broadband expansion.
How did the state of Iowa manage not to do that within, well, you probably can't answer that, but that seems rather stunning to me.
How'd the state of Iowa send back $35 million that would have went to address our child care crisis? You know, how'd they send back $90 million that would have went towards healthcare measures in schools and vaccination testing? Our governor hates us, might be one of it. But honestly, a lot of the work I do, you know, I'll be clear, in my mind, you know, in conversations I've had all over the state, we're not going to get anywhere at the state level. It's going to have to start with hyper-localized base building and making change at the county, city, and local governments, because nobody wants to admit we've lost the state. We've lost it. The state is gone. Any Republican that goes against Kim Reynolds will be taken out by Heritage Foundation and her little whatever those groups are. You know, everybody that opposed her on vouchers last year, every Republican that opposed her on vouchers last year is gone. They're gone. They did not make it through the last election. So that's how it goes. But that's because they've built that kind of power, because they focused on the rural areas, you know, and that's what we need to do, is focus on these communities as well. Any other questions? All right, next slide. So this is what we're going to get into next with the potential fundings out of some of these bills that I mentioned. So like I said, there's the IIJA, or the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And there's $5 billion that came to Iowa for infrastructure. That goes for everything from water, roads and bridges, electrification, resiliency, electric vehicle charging stations, clean water, clean energy, airports, wildfire, you know, prevention, you know, all kinds of different things. So out of that, you know, there's opportunities for transportation, energy, broadband, environmental remediation. There is also a remaining bucket of American Rescue Plan Act funds at the state, county, and local level that has not been spent yet. Governor Reynolds has been very deliberate with the funding that she does spend from the federal government, and is always careful to make sure that she gets the credit for it and not the federal government or this administration. So, and a lot of it she's been sending back. So, but there are at the state, county, and local level still ARPA funding buckets. As I said, the Inflation Reduction Act measures that are aimed at lowering energy costs for working class Iowans, cleaner energy production, and just transition, and lowering carbon emissions. And then also there's private investments into projects and corporate campaigns, which are going to be happening, especially with the CHIPS and Science Act, because you know, corporations love money. So if you know, there's factories for chips manufacturing that comes here, you know, there's probably going to be private investment to expand onto that. Or we see with like the Google Fiber centers or the Amazon centers or whatever else that are literally draining our counties and state of energy. The Google factory down in Pottawatomie County is drawing so much energy that instead of shutting down their coal-fired power plant down there, they're expanding onto it currently to keep up with Google's energy intake. Go ahead.
Of the $5 billion infrastructure dollars that have come to our state, who determines who gets those and how much?
Good question. So the $5 billion that's coming to our state, that's a mixture of, so that is formula grant funding that the federal government said Iowa gets this much. Out of that $5 billion, there's formula grants that will automatically go to counties and cities and towns. So a formula grant is based on whatever statistics they muster up at the state level, they'll divvy out the money to these areas. And then there's competitive grant funding, which is something that grant writers in cities and communities would apply for. It's open buckets of money, and that can be applied for at the state, directly to the federal government it can be applied for. So there's two different buckets, and it's a whole lot of money.
So our auditor here and our board of supervisors would know about this?
Based on what I'm learning, a lot of them, they didn't know anything about the American Rescue Plan Act because the money is rolling out so quickly, and a lot of our rural communities simply don't have the policy and advocacy support or staff, you know, as county employees to keep up on it. I'm guessing supervisors don't know much about this other than what maybe the attorneys mustered up.
Because what we have heard from our supervisors that we are 50 million behind on our roads and bridges.
Well, we just got, 1 billion of that total is for roads, flat out the gate. 1 billion, about 1 billion is for roads coming into the state, so.
But they need to know something about that in order to get part of it, right?
Yes, for certain parts of it, there will be grant funding, the formula grant funding that will automatically go to the county, but then there's a competitive.
When you say formula, does that mean they give so much and we give so much matching? Is that the kind of thing as formula?
Nope. It would just be the formula that bases how much each county gets. So Decorah will obviously probably get more than Fayette County, for example, out of the formula funding. But if Fayette County took advantage of some of the competitive grants, we could end up getting more than Winneshiek if our board of supervisors and our county officials took the initiative to seek out those grants and apply for them. I mean, some of those do, to answer your question, they do come with matching. So for example, at the state level, if we would have put up $3 million, we would have gotten $35 million for child care. We didn't put up the $3 million, so we didn't get the 35. And any other questions on this before we move to the next slides?
Makes sense of that.
No questions? All right, we're good to move to the next one then. So these are some surveys that I've done across the state. This survey in particular, I surveyed about 750 people in Iowa. This is out of date, this is 709, but so the first question I ask people is, this is where money can be spent in your community out of the infrastructure laws. What are 3 areas that you care about the most? Water, clean energy, and roads and bridges were the top that came out of this, followed by good and cheap internet, public transportation, and improved airports. And I will share all these slides with you all if I get your emails after that, so you can look at these at your leisure. And then, how would you like the infrastructure projects to improve the lives of workers? The top answer was, with 65.9%, was ensure workers get the prevailing wage for the jobs they perform. In Iowa, we are a right-to-work state. We also participate in road swaps programs, which means that we take federal money that has federal standards like local hire, buy American materials, prevailing wage, getting paid the highest wage for the craft that you're participating in. we take that federal money and we literally launder it. We wash it through a state general fund, and once that money finally makes it to our communities, it doesn't have Buy American standards, it doesn't have prevailing wage, it doesn't have local hire standards. So that's where you get work camps that come in and do the work. They do the pipelines, they do the roads, the bridges. Then they leave and they take all that money that was dedicated for Iowa and they spend it in their own communities. You know, and then, you know, that money that's meant to be a stimulus and take care of inflation here, people don't stay and spend the money here because they don't live here, whether they can't afford housing or whatever it is. So that was the top issue, followed by creating jobs for members of low income, rural, and communities of color, and then followed by strengthening and protecting the rights of workers, providing training for better paying jobs. And what I find interesting is the lowest on here is create more union jobs. And I wonder why that's the lowest when everything else up here is what you get with a union. You know what I mean? So what it shows to me when I gave a similar presentation like this at the Federation Convention a few months ago, labor has some way to go with educating workers. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. And so the final question was a three-part question I asked people in these surveys. How would you like infrastructure projects to impact your community? And the top was address climate change and expand clean energy.
Wow.
You know, we might be a conservative state, but we're not stupid. You know, we see the impacts of weather. You know, a lot of us been here for a long time. We see the impacts of weather and climate. Hi, Steve. All around us because we live it, we breathe it. It's part of our community and economy. And so people recognize that. Come on in.
Well, I'll go around this way. I just need to talk to Heidi if she's.
She's back that way.
Okay. Are you well, David?
Huh?
Are you well?
I'm good. I'm always good.
Okay, good. I'm glad to see you.
Good to see you too, Steve. And then it's followed by creating good jobs for unemployed and low-wage workers, improve the environment, strengthening local economies, creating infrastructure in historically disadvantaged communities, and then expanding public transportation. Top takeaways that I got from this were clean water and sustainable energy to increase to address the environmental crisis is the top issue in all our polling. Good paying jobs that allow for people to work and stay where they live because people care about where they live. And my take is that rural Iowa's not dying, it's just stuck and we need to just get the gears moving again. You know, I don't mean to sound like a defeatist. Don't count on any national Democrats or progressives to come to our help, they won't. None of the major, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, none of them want to put a dime into this state, you know. But Heritage Foundation will drop 20 million like they're not even bothered about it. So it's going to be on us. Nobody's going to come to save us, and it's going to have to start with this local work and build off of that. Before I keep going, any questions on the surveys or anything here? No questions? All right, we're good to go, Fred.
Well, I have
Yeah.
those don't sound like the kind of people that would support the Republican agenda. People that have those values, it doesn't make sense to me.
The national Democratic agenda, and a lot, you know, isn't really even reminiscent to what a lot of the Democratic majority is, if we want to be honest. They're a sector, you know, but I know a lot of Democrats that are, you know, they're pro-gun. You know, I mean, I've got guns at home myself. You know, I've got an assault rifle at home. You know, I'm still progressive. You know, but I would be ostracized by some wings of the national Democratic agenda if I were to, you know, say I like healthcare and guns. You know what I mean? So these people that I don't do when I do these surveys, like I reach out to these people. A lot of these people are just working class folks like you and me that probably go to Club 45. You know, and are just like, you know, I want to keep my guns, but also like I don't want the earth to burn up. You know, there's always common ground to be found. It's not as you know, politics ain't a football game. I've never seen it as, you know, left or right. It's more up and down to me anymore. And we want to go up, all of us. We want, you know, even Eugene V. Debs, who is a socialist who won over 1 million votes for president from a prison cell for opposing World War I, he said, everybody from Rockefeller to anyone in this country is a progressive. I don't know anybody that's not a progressive. It's just all about progressing towards what? Any other questions?
Is it true none of this would have happened if Trump had been president?
No, that's not true. This bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, is the same damn bill that was presented under Trump. And even when I went up and met with Chuck Grassley and Feenstra and Don Bacon, when I went to Washington, I didn't go meet with Democrats. I went and met with Republicans. I went and met with Chuck Grassley. I met with Feenstra and stuff. And they said, you know, they were supporters of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and both of them said, I don't know why there were any Republicans that didn't support us. It's the same darn bill that was under Trump, you know, so it's that whole political schism we gotta get past. People care about the issues, but it's this national and media and all this narrative that's like, you guys better fight each other, don't look at the real enemy, you know, fight your, whoever, if you're red or blue. Any other questions? All right, we can move on to the next one then. So potential statewide, regional, and county policy campaigns. These are just some things that I pulled out of what are some potentials and some things that we've seen other places do in other states. So in Colorado, we established the state office for just transition. That was us. We secured, I think, like $15 million or something like that from the state to implement an office of just transition to move away from coal-fired power plants, natural gas extraction, things like that, towards renewable energy. We were even able to bring in some corporations behind that because, in all honesty, corporations aren't switching to renewable energy because they finally have had a change of heart. No, it's more profitable now. It's more profitable to switch to renewables, and that's why they're switching. So let's take advantage of that. You know, if they want to do it because of their money reasons, we'll do it because of practical and moral reasons. And so we could do that here in Iowa. That's a state level thing. A federal level thing potentially would be move to end federal road swap practices to make sure that the money coming into Iowa to fix our roads and bridges and stuff remains in Iowa. To keep our ditches maintained remains in Iowa, so there's not work groups coming from outside the state getting exploited, mind you. It's exploited workers, sometimes maybe even undocumented workers, and then they take that money and leave the state. So I've talked to some Republican legislators that are behind ending road swaps, which was a bill written by our good friend Representative Axney. It's literally the easiest bill I've ever read. It's 3 sentences. It's 3 sentences. It just says end road swaps. So there are talks right now. We've got a coalition from Woodbury going back to Washington, D.C. beginning of May to talk about H.R. 3559, which is Stop Swaps, Protect Local Jobs Act, and see if we can get any movement with some Iowa legislators on that. Also, there's worker rights and infrastructure town halls across 99 counties to seed education to residents on the opportunities in their communities with BIL and IRA. And I mean that with bringing in city councilors, board of supervisors members, and go to every single county. That's something I'd like to try to hopefully set up at some point, and talk to every county community members about what this massive investment from the federal government means, and also what it means if we don't take advantage of this opportunity. You know, there's local federal implementation campaigns to chase competitive funding, like what we were talking about, and accessible directly by communities, cities, and counties to circumvent the state, which is often a problem for a lot of our items we want to address. And then also, a lot of these real rural counties, or even unincorporated places, like what's just west of here, what's that little community that begins with a D? It's unincorporated. I don't remember what it's called. Dorchester. Over in Dorchester, I guarantee you they ain't got a grant writer. I bet you they don't, so they're not going to be able to take advantage of any of these opportunities. So what if we secured some kind of, you know, we got a bunch of counties together and secured some support to have the state implement a fund that provides grant writers upon request to help take advantage of these. So these are just some ideas of what could be done. If you can go to the next one. And then also there's some projects themselves, like Eastern Iowa Public Transportation Campaign. You know, imagine you know, I mean, think, when I've talked to Pranita Guptal or all these other White House administration officials, domestic policy council, people with the Inflation Reduction Act, they said, dream as big as you can and then dream bigger. Like, that's how much money's coming out. If we want a light rail that runs from Decorah to Dubuque along the Mississippi River, the money's there. You know, the money's there. We could have a light rail. You know, do we want public bus transport that goes back and forth to Iowa City and it's constantly running from up Decorah up and down the Mississippi River to get people their doctor's appointments? The money's there to do it if we fight for it. Expanding electrifying public transportation, interstate passenger rail. There's competitive bipartisan infrastructure legislation, grant funding for state electrical grid modernization, creating a network of electric vehicle charging stations, infrastructure in Iowa. So, you know, instead of it, you know, have electric vehicle charging stations at Hy-Vees and Walmarts, you know, places where working class folks often go. You know, unfortunately, working class folks, if they're real lower class, like, they're not hanging out down on Main Street, you know, eating $15 hamburgers, you know what I mean? They're going to Walmart and they're going home. That's like me, I grew up patches on patches poor, I didn't hang out, you know, downtown. Or upgrading and improving the energy efficiency of public schools and electrified school buses. Your school board right now could apply for funding to electrify your school bus fleet.
Wow.
Right now, the money is there. I think 11 counties in Iowa have already gotten a chunk of the money. But we could apply to electrify your school bus systems. Clean water initiatives are the top one though. Like everybody was seeing here, environment, clean water, clean energy. 59% said clean water, 56% said clean energy. So these are just some ideas to tack on to some of the issues y'all have already said, the priorities that are there for you. These are just some ways of me taking what you've said and saying, okay, this is what we could do with it. Are we on game to try any of this stuff? You know, or even with the ditches. I bet you the Farm Bureau will be all on board with making sure that ditch program maintains. They're our enemies in a lot of ways, but they care about ditches. You know, they fought to help revamp the bottle recycling program, believe it or not, in Iowa. Farm Bureau led that, you know, because they don't want bottles ending up in their ditches, you know, and messing up their farm equipment and whatever else. Any questions on or reflections on some of these just example items or anything like that?
I'm curious about number 5. Who decides what clean energy is?
That's a great question. We haven't defined it internally. It's, you know, essentially in the Inflation Reduction Act, in the BIL, a lot of it is around wind turbines, you know, what am I thinking? Wind turbines, solar panels, things like that. Nuclear energy has not been talked about much. That's probably because people are still afraid of it. You know, because there's a lot of bad stuff that happened a half a century ago with it, but we're a half a century later into the future now, so, you know.
Still waste.
Huh?
There's still waste.
There's still waste, exactly.
But I was also curious about ethanol, corn-based.
I'm not interested in fight for ethanol. Personally, I'm not. You know.
Only at the bar.
Huh? Yeah. Only at the bar. What are your thoughts on ethanol?
It's a waste of money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a way of maintaining this kind of monocrop system we've got in Iowa, where half it goes to the ethanol, the rest of it goes to China or into the hogs to feed that go to China.
There's
or
something
wherever
called
else.
the waters of the U.S.
Yes,
What was that?
yes.
There's something called the waters of the U.S. Does
Yes.
anybody know more about that and how?
Otis?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Floating?
Waters of the United States.
it has an implication for farmers, I think, and how
Sure
that
it
they handle their.
Yes, farmers aren't happy, so it's presented, with the federal government making more conservative rules about how waters can be used. So that a farm person might want the liberty to do more things with the water than the current federal government is allowing. And right now it's before the Supreme Court, right?
I don't know, but
Yes.
I know,
It's right,
I think
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
pretty big
it's-
issue.
Right,
And don't you know about this?
It's a very big issue out in the Mountain West. I know, Montana, Colorado area. It's a very big issue, especially with the ranchers and diversion of water. You know,
I think it's a big issue for farmers.
I bet
right
you it would
here.
be a
Yeah.
big issue.
So-
Yeah.
Very briefly,
Yeah.
the deal is that waters, the protection, the Clean Water Act dealt primarily with lakes and larger ponds and big rivers, and did not deal with creeks and wetlands. So,
Might be
by,
temporary.
whatever his name is.
Wilson?
Obama.
Obama, thank you, expanded waters of the United States
WOTUS, Waters of
include,
the United States.
wetlands and smaller creeks, and so that they had also to be clean. What this does is mean that farmers can't drain all of their swamps to grow corn on that doesn't belong there.
Right.
So Trump reversed all of that and took back the definition of waters of the United States to include only big waters. And Biden has reversed that, so that now is going towards the Supreme Court to define which definition will remain for waters in the United States to be clean.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
And isn't it true too that they were opposed to it because of runoff from the hog lots and everything getting into those smaller streams?
Right.
Being yeah.
And that's the same thing with ethanol as well. It's like, you know, there's the argument that ethanol is a transition towards clean energy, or it's a clean energy alternative, but, you know, when we think of where ethanol comes from, it comes from corn, and while we're only responsible for about 10 to 15% of the soil erosion that goes into the Mississippi River, we're pretty good at our soil retention. We're responsible for 25% of the nitrogen and whatnot that dumps in the Mississippi and contributes to the algae blooms down the Gulf of Mexico. So, ethanol is not sustainable. It's right move maybe one direction, but we got to go further for sure.
Go, John.
Any other? Yeah.
Is there any way to think about a new frontier that we've come into? We're at the front end of something here that I don't think any of us, including myself, really understand, but it's here, and they're making it work, and it's called artificial intelligence.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with
And it
that.
sounds like maybe computers solve problems, maybe they created problems. Same thing's gonna happen with artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
It's gonna solve a lot of things we never came up with, but on the other hand, there'll be another side to it that you don't like either. But it's, whether you like it or not, it's here, and it's working, and it's gonna have an effect on everything.
It's a terrifying effect
It
on
is.
everything too. So and then you think about, you know, someone said factions, talked about factions earlier, and people splitting into groups. You know, the Luddites might become a cool thing. You know, again, the people that are like throw the technology down the drain. Who knows? But AI is doing miraculous things, and I don't understand it enough. And you know, we're probably on the same page with it. But I haven't thought a lot about AI because that's just really come to the public in the last couple months. But it's something to definitely consider, because what if AI tells us this is how you need to do things, you know, but then you got humans that are making the decisions. You know, they're like, well, my donors tell me not to do that, AI, you know what I mean? So we're in a little bit of a sticky situation with that one.
It's just a new time.
It's a new time, new frontier. I like the way that you put that too. Any other questions or comments on some of these like ideas that I threw up here?
I have a short comment about clean water.
Yeah.
We saw a program just recently about microplastics keep becoming more and more, well, this concerns the Great Lakes, I think, and, you know, it
Yes.
winds up in the ocean and it winds up in our bodies, and what's being done? Is there an answer?
For the microplastics?
Yes.
I honestly don't know enough about the specificity of the pollutants. A lot of my stuff, because I'm a farmer, you know, revolved around the chemicals that negligent farming puts into our water. When it comes to negligent corporations that are putting beads in face wash or whatever else, I don't know much about the microplastic stuff, but I'd be interested to learn about it, and there might be an angle. I mean, there's trillions of dollars here that got released during the pandemic out of these 4 bills. Like, there might be something there for that. I don't know. In full transparency, all organizing groups across the United States are trying to figure out how to work with these huge bills. UTST and Who's Your Action, Indiana, and like the Win DC campaign. Like, there's a couple of us that are a lot further than others because we've been doing a lot of research and policy development over the last 6 to 8 months on this. But a lot of people are still learning, and that's why we're having, you know, kind of a conversation about what all this money means and does it fall in line with your priorities. And if none of this money falls in line with your priorities, that don't mean we ain't going to organize around some stuff. We're still going to organize here around, you know, I mean, if it's ditches, then it's ditches, you know. Any other questions before we move on? I think we're almost done with the slides.
We're almost done with the time.
Oh, almost done with time too? I didn't even check time. We can go to the next slide. All right, so core campaign strategies. So some of the main strategies are coalition stakeholder engagement, which means expanding on a coalition that we build around the issue, as well as bringing in the stakeholders, or engaging with the stakeholders, who are the people that are invested in the change. You know, who's going to be directly impacted or benefited or set back by this change that we're pushing towards. Direct base building and mobilization of community members. I've been building base for a long time. Direct action on targets. I love taking direct action. Digital organizing and social media, public education. If y'all are interested in some of the media we've garnered in the last 2.5 years in Iowa, I think we've garnered about 60 state and national media articles. Even Jesse Waters on Fox News did a part on one of my campaigns, believe it or not. And then shareholder engagement and organizing, private sector targets. And then again, it could go into electoral. And we can go to the next slide, Fred. And so then that was our open discussion thing. So to close out here, because we're over time actually, aren't we, by 9 minutes? I'm just going to sit back down and talk to y'all real quick about what some of your reflections were on some of this. Thank you for that, Fred. And I'll share these slides with you as well, so you can go back over them on your own time. But what are some folks' thoughts about this infrastructure funding? Is this the first time y'all heard about this stuff? You heard it? Is it the first time?
Oh, I mean, we've seen the paper as far as the acts that have been, the Inflation Act and the Clean Water, all this other stuff. I mean, it's all out there, but people don't understand most of it. And I think your explanation is help put some body to it, but that information is out there if you want to glean something about it.
It's a lot of information
Yeah, I
too.
know.
I still don't know half about it. There's so much interesting stuff in there. It's tremendous. So
What
really,
is stunning to me is there's money, there's lots of money out there. And I'm thinking, where is all this money coming from?
You and me.
they always tell us that
Well, they're
there's
gonna
not money.
print, just they're gonna
There's
print.
money.
Printed,
Sure.
I guess.
It's available. You know,
Yeah.
now it's what do we do with
Yeah.
it, or do we do nothing?
You casually threw out like light rail along the Mississippi. I can't think of a dumber idea.
Oh, really?
Well, I'm sorry.
No, no. Please share.
No, I just threw it out because I thought they couldn't even get light rail between the Twin Cities and Rochester when they were thinking about, developing a medical corridor along there. It was very, very unpopular. And I don't know why we would want to, put in something like that, but maybe
He was just throwing out hypotheticals.
Okay,
but
well,
the,
no, I know, but I mean, I
the,
laughed, I choked on that.
Yeah, I mean, it would all come down to what's the best bang for the buck.
Right, no,
Like,
I mean, I can't.
What
it would-
went along the
Right.
river corridor is one thing, but from
Yes.
Minneapolis to Rochester, that's a whole nother thing.
Oh, I know, but I'm
And if
okay.
there's not people that's gonna use them, then
That's the main thing, yeah. So like there is a project going on. The reason why I said that as a suggestion is because there is a light rail that's being built between Omaha and Council Bluffs right now with this money.
Yeah.
Omaha decided that they were going to build this light rail through their downtown and stuff, and immediately what happened is Omaha Health jumped on, and they're building a whole brand new facility with 12,000 new jobs right along that track. So like you said, medical corridor and stuff.
Okay, medical, okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, a medical corridor is one thing, the scenic beauty of the Mississippi River makes no sense. to
Oh,
me.
no, it's just
You were just hypothesizing and I jumped on something because it sounded,
crazy.
like, well.
It is, but that's what we're told by the White House right now is think of the biggest thing that you can possibly want to do, and then think bigger than that, and the money's there for it.
So the Avenue of the Saints could become a light rail of the Saints.
What's the Avenue of the Saints?
The Avenue of the Saints is a long time ago project to
Yeah.
go from St. Louis to St. Paul,
Mm,
and to make a big,
sure.
to make all 4-lane highways. Well, it's got parts and pieces of it, and it never did make it all the way.
Yes.
And it probably is a good thing that it didn't make it all the way, because we
Who
don't,
says it didn't make it all the way?
You can drive
It
it.
is
You can try
there,
it.
Yeah, it is,
4-lane all the way down.
but it isn't light rail, it's a
No.
highway that
Yeah.
our then congressman thought of. Well, what I like about that idea is I think you could really go hog wild, and I think we should. Dream big, like what would I like? Well, I would like, a quarter of Winnebago County to be used to plant trees and prairie. And I would like a 50-foot buffer along every major creek and river, because I think it would be
Yeah, 50 yards, that sounds good.
50 yards, better. And I'd like people, paid for it, and I would like very strict laws in Iowa about building any more confinements of anything.
IOCCI is doing good work on that. So
Yeah.
that's their specialty. I don't want to step on their toes.
Okay, well, I
but
don't wanna step on their, CCI is doing.
They're doing really
to
good
try
stuff
to-
about that.
Okay, thank you for telling me that, cause I didn't know that. But I bet there are things that you have, pet projects, and this is the amazing thing. Money has never been the issue to doing good in the United States of America, or Iowa.
No.
It has never been that. It is who gets the money and how they get it. Well, this is something that opens up us getting the money
Mhm.
for a change. Like, I assume you're hitting on this. How is it that those 5 supervisors have no idea of this, and they're talking about cutting, as is the entire state of Iowa, when there's all this money, and what they should be talking about is, how do we get our share
Right.
of that money?
So the question is, how do we educate our supervisors?
Right,
Well,
right.
Starting with them, I mean,
And
to
just-
know that this is available.
Right, I
Yeah.
think that's a good question.
'Cause if
How do
he's-
we confront
yeah.
them with,
We don't need to
Not
cut our
having this.
conservation
No.
department, we don't need to cut other things that
No.
are good, benefit, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to take too much of y'all's time, because I know we're already over time, and I still have to drive to Rochester to pick up a motorcycle part tonight, but what I will say is if there's, and I'll talk to Mel and others about Mel and Fred and
Yeah.
stuff, if there's an opportunity where I can come back again, you know,
Yeah.
at another meeting, what I'd like to do is I'd like to do some presentations. I've got some case studies that I've made on the Woodbury County and Potawatomi County
yes,
campaign, so I'd like to show you how we finally did get the supervisors' attention and got them engaged in our campaigns, and to sit down and talk about some of our demands that we wanted. So I'd love to present that, and then maybe do
Yes.
some strategic campaign planning on what we could do with, I'd like to explore this prairie restoration, or what was it?
Integrated roadside vegetation management program.
Yes, absolutely, and if someone, and actually, if you don't mind, if I can pass this around, do folks mind writing down their name and phone number on, or email, so I can get in contact with them and send
Sure.
you these slides and stuff?
What's the best place for us to get more knowledgeable about the program that you were talking about the money?
About the money, so, if you put your name and email on here, I'm gonna send you a couple bits of information. I'll send you the slides, but I'm also going to send you I'm gonna send you another presentation that's much more detailed if you really wanna go into the weeds and start looking at specifics. It was written by Pranita Gupta, who used to be the special advisor to the Biden administration on, I believe it was on labor and workforce, I'd have to remember again. But she's no longer with the administration, but she's running all over the country like Paul Revere, telling everybody about this money. And she's given this presentation on federal investment opportunities, so I'll send that stuff off as well. I'll send you everything that I've got, but it is a lot of stuff, but we've tried to water it down as much as possible so people aren't reading, 10, 15-page long documents.
But there's enough in there that we should be able to take care of all our roads and bridges and get caught up.
Oh, gosh, yes. Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
see, they need to know that. They
Absolutely.
need to know that that's.
So we
They
gotta
need to know a
cut
lot of
services.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in here for some really cool stuff.
So specifically, we talked about the roadside sustainability, I mean, just protecting our water. Is there a specific fund that would come out of?
The protecting the you're talking about the roadside,
Right.
I forget what it's called, but yeah, the roadside
Mhm.
program. That's what we need to figure out. So the last thing I wanna do is come into a community and say, hey guys, this is what we're gonna organize around. That's not the way that I operate. That's why we kinda started the meeting with public sharing what's important to you. And I kinda took what you said and I said, well, here's this money here in federal investments, like, your issues, we can see if there's ways we can tie it into the federal investments. So now that I know that this roadside management issue is a hot button issue here, we can talk to our policy guys in DC who are way smarter than me. Heck, I barely graduated high school, never went to college, I can't figure this stuff out. But we'll talk to them and say, you know, here's the situation, where's the money at that we can tap for this? You know, so that's kind of the way that we're approaching it right now. We're not looking at it as, there's all this money, let's fight for something. We're saying, what are the community's priorities and do those priorities fit into the federal funding? So we're putting you before the money is what we're doing. And if it doesn't fit in there, that don't mean we're not gonna fight for it, you know what I mean? If we can build support around it, I'd be happy to get involved with a campaign like that and win some good stuff. Any other questions at all?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and
Yeah.
I look forward to you coming
Thank you.
back. I'm sorry that we have to.
No, that's all right, sorry I took it over